So, what are you doing with your life? I mean, that's a huge question, right? Today, we're going to dive into how the philosopher J. Krishnamurti tackles it and see if we can find an answer that really, truly matters. And you know exactly the question I'm talking about. It's got some real weight to it, doesn't it? It's the one that seems to pop up in those quiet moments, maybe when you're staring at the ceiling late at night. So, what is the answer? We all feel this immense pressure to have an answer, but finding one? Man, it can feel like you're just fumbling around in the dark. And that's exactly what we're here to unpack. All right, let's get into it. To even start to find an answer, Krishnamurti says we first have to understand why we're even asking the question in the first place. He kind of frames it as a journey through our own inner chaos, with his work acting as our guide. So where do we even begin? Well, Krishnamurti's first move is to diagnose the problem. He says that all the stuff we struggle with day to day, the anxiety, the fear, the sadness, they're not just random. They're all symptoms of something deeper, our own inner chaos. And get this, the main culprit isn't what's happening out there. It's what's happening in here. Krishnamurti really zeroes in on what he calls psychological fear. It's that constant nagging anxiety that isn't about any real immediate danger, but is totally created by our thoughts about the past and the future. Krishnamurti puts it so simply, fear is a product of thought. Just let that sink in for a second. He's not talking about the instinct to jump out of the way of a car. Nope. He's talking about that mental hamster wheel, worrying about losing your job or endlessly replaying something painful that happened. Our own minds, he says, are basically a fear factor. And this distinction is absolutely crucial. You've got two types of fear. On one side, there's that healthy, protective fear, the kind that keeps you alive. But on the other side, you have this destructive psychological fear, which is all about what we think might happen. And that, Krishnamurti says, is the stuff that paralyzes us. It's what keeps us from really living. And it's not just fear stirring up all this inner chaos. He also talks about sorrow. He says it comes from these super universal human things, right? Loss, wanting something you don't have, loneliness, and that really tough one, self-pity. Okay, so we've got this chaos going on inside us, but what's feeding it? Krishnamurti argues that the way our society is set up basically just pours gasoline on that fire. I mean, think about it. We're taught from day one to compete, to compare ourselves to everyone else, to figure out if we're good enough. It's a system that tends to box us in instead of helping us understand ourselves. All right, so that's the diagnosis. And yeah, it can feel a little heavy, but this is where everything starts to shift. We're moving from the problem to the solution. And for Krishnamurti, the only way out is to go in. The whole path to transformation is an inward journey. And this right here, this is the absolute heart of his entire philosophy. The idea that trying to change your job, your relationships, or even the world, it's all kind of pointless unless you first transform yourself on the inside. Real, lasting change has to start from within. Okay, but how do you actually do that, right? It sounds so abstract. Well, Krishnamurti breaks it down into 3 steps. Step 1 is just to admit that you're dissatisfied, to listen to that little voice inside that says, something's not right. Then, step 2, instead of running away from sorrow and pain, you turn and face it. You look it straight in the eye. And finally, step 3, and this is the real game changer, you learn to just watch your own thoughts without judging them. You see them come and go without sticking a good or bad label on them. Because it's in that quiet, non-judgmental observation that you finally start to see where they're coming from. So when you start doing this inner work, what actually changes on the outside? Well, it starts by completely redefining some of the biggest ideas in our lives, like what success and love even mean. Let's talk about ambition. We're all told to be ambitious, right? But Krishnamurti connects that drive directly to fear and insecurity, this constant need to compare and compete. He puts that up against passion. Passion isn't about beating someone else. It's just about the deep love of doing the thing itself. One leads to stress and conflict, the other to a truly fulfilling life. And he takes that same sharp look at our relationships. What we often call love, he might say is actually more like attachment. It's based on possessiveness, jealousy, and what we can get from the other person. But real love, in his eyes, is totally different. It's selfless. It can't even exist in the same room as fear or jealousy. And this is a wild one. He says, love cannot be thought about. Love cannot be cultivated. Love cannot be practiced. What he means is, Love isn't a skill your brain can master. It's not a deal you can negotiate. It's a state of being, something that just shows up when that fearful, calculating part of our mind finally gets quiet. So, after all this hard inner work, where does it all lead? What's the end game here? Well, the ultimate goal, the answer to that huge question we started with, is all about living a life of true, authentic passion. After digging through all that complexity, the goal is surprisingly simple, but also incredibly profound. It's about living a life of freedom, a life of genuine passion, free from all those psychological fears and societal pressures that are always trying to hold us back. And make no mistake, the stakes are really high here. As Krishnamurthy warns, without passion, we're just setting ourselves up for a life of mediocrity, a kind of emotional numbness. So passion isn't just a nice to have. It's literally the lifeblood of a meaningful existence. And that brings us to the biggest fear of them all, right? Death. But Krishnamurthy reframes it with this incredible insight. The fear of death is the fear of letting go of what we know. Think about that. We're not afraid of the end itself. We're afraid of losing our attachments, our memories, our identity, everything our mind has built up. And that leaves us with one last, really powerful question to take with you. If our biggest fear is just the fear of letting go of what's familiar, what would you do if you weren't afraid to let go?